let's connect an economist from the late 20th century and somebody who's been called a cheat. Let's start with Smokey Yunick. Smokey Yunick, man, this guy's story is incredible. He is an innovator. He was an engineer. He was a car mechanic. He was a racer, and he was very prolific. According to his words, his claim to fame is that like 90% of the NASCAR rule book at one point was written because of him. And I'll give you an example. The ideas in this NASCAR race itself, going through like the Daytona 500 or whatnot, is how to refuel these cars quickly. So Mr. Smokey decided that he's going to build this contraption to hold his gas tank. So he makes this contraption, he gets to the race, and he sets up this contraption. It's like a 15-foot tall steel braced piece with this can of gas in the middle, and fills up his car. Everybody's kind of looking at him, looking at their team. They don't see anything off. All the officials come around, inspect it. Everything seems to be on the up and up, and they go their way. So they have their qualifying rounds, and it's the day of the race. And they get there, and all of a sudden they look over at Smokey's side where their pit stop crew is, and this gas tank is now 15 feet up in the air. The time to fill his tank went from minutes to like instantaneous because of the pressure and just the inches of water column and pressure that you get from raising that liquid so much higher above where the car is. He would get an immediate turnaround. And guess what? Rules changed. Nowhere inside the rules did it state that you couldn't put your gas can 15 feet in the air, so they had to write it in. So what does he do? He goes back, and he decides that this time around, if I can't have my gas tank in here, then I need to have less time where I'm going to actually be refilling my car. So next race he comes through, goes through, and the way that they would test to make sure that all the gas tanks are the same is they take this, I don't know, call it 20 gallons of gas in this jug that's pre-measured, and they pour it into the gas tank, and they make sure that the level is full. And then they would say, all right, you're good to go. Your gas tank's good. So what he did is, nowhere in the rule book did it say that you could remove something from your gas tank. It just had to, at the time before the race, it had to be able to hold that 20 gallons and nothing further. So what he did is he put a basketball inside of his tank. And when it was inflated, it was exactly 20 gallons. And when he de-inflated or let the air out of that ball, it opened up another about 2 gallons inside of his gas tank. Everybody got upset about this once everybody knew what was going on, so the rules changed again. Now, before the race, people have to disassemble and remove the gas tank from their car so that the officials can inspect this gas tank. So what does Smokey do? He goes back and he starts thinking up a way of doing this. Now, the officials are catching on. And so they're going through and they're just nailing him with the book on all these little things that kind of fit within the rules, kind of don't. So he gets like a list of like 9 items, and he's getting pissed off at this point. He's throwing things around. He's getting upset. His voice is raising, all of this. And so he runs over to his car. He hops in it and he yells back to the officials, I'm going to give you one more thing to write me up on. And he drives off with his gas tank sitting right next to the officials. And he had put a 2-inch gas line that was 11 feet long inside of his car. Nowhere in the rule book did it say what that size of your gas line could be or how long it was. So now moving over to our economist side, Rory Sutherland, he's a London economist. He's best known for kind of looking into perception and the psychology into different marketing. He's a marketer. One of the things that he believes is that psychology doesn't have really a good business framework to work in. You know, it tends to be kind of these random insights and different subsections of the business, but there's no logic necessarily to it itself. And so Rory Sutherland really looks up to kind of this economist from the first half of the 20th century called Ludwig von Mises. And he's an Austrian school economist. And what's interesting about the Austrian economists is that they, especially in this time frame, is that they grew up with Freud. And they really had the handle on something called praxeology, which is just kind of the study of human choice and decision-making itself. And so when you're lathering that in with the economy and economics, you get some really interesting insights. From a marketing and advertising perspective, there was this idea that what is value? You have like the true value, which is what our company is like actually giving to our clients and what they're actually paying for. And then there's this, in his words, kind of this dubious value that we just kind of assign to something. And to give you an example, when Ludwig von Mises was having debates with kind of an interesting set of economists called the French physiocrats, they would get into these conversations because the French physiocrats believed that, let's say there's a shepherd and the shepherd has the wool and they shear the wool from the sheep and then they sell that wool. That's true value. But if somebody bought that wool and then they made a hat, they're actually kind of stealing value from the shepherd itself. And so there's this kind of divergence on what is made up value and what is real value. And what von Mises would bring to the table is that if you have a Michelin-style restaurant and they're serving this immaculate food, but the entire floor of the restaurant is flooded, there's sewage all over, it just smells. There's no distinction between the value you would create from cooking the food to sweeping the floor. The idea that in order to increase and help this business, it isn't going to come from making your Michelin-style food that much better. It comes from cleaning your floor. Rory Sutherland kind of brings to the table from this economic side that if perception is worse than reality, what the heck are we doing trying to change reality? So here's how we're going to tie French physiocrats and Ludwig von Mises and Rory Sutherland together with Smokey Yunick. All right. Inside of our business, there's a few things that I've got some questions and I want to ask you guys to think about when you're going into your teams tomorrow or the next day, or just as business continues. First off, what is that 2-inch gas line, that 2-inch, 11-foot long gas line that is in our business that is going to be forced to be created because we're hitting our glass ceiling and we need to think about things differently? How can we innovate with the people that we have, with the processes that we have, to fit within the rule books on what we can and can't do, but how can we innovate in a way that we're going to change an entire industry and maybe people around you say, oh no, they're cheating. How do we get that type of a reaction to where people want to take our innovation from last year and put it into their business and see a lift? Then on the same side, what inside of our business is like that really dirty sewage-filled floor in our restaurant? And are we focused on actually fixing our Michelin-style food, or are we focused on sweeping that floor? Have we identified that there is value in something else that we've just been overlooking for a long period of time? And then in addition to that, since perception is so leaky, is our problem truly a perception problem, or is reality better than the perception? And if that's the case, let's focus on changing the perception over reality. But once we've done that, once we've allowed our kind of crazy, random, psychological mind to try to have tackle this problem, we also need to recognize, is this an engineered solution that we need instead of a perception? Are there things in our business that we've just said, hey, you need to perceive this differently, but in reality, the store's on fire, right? These are things that I want us to take into our organizations and think about so that we can be innovators. We can be those change agents that are going to drive our businesses and our people forward in a really unique and beneficial way. So that's how we're going to tie French physiocrats to NASCAR cheating. And here you go. So I hope you've enjoyed this. Guys, we've got a responsibility to make sure that we are driving change and driving it in a good way and giving people the opportunity to look at things in the right way, to implement things in the right way, and innovate the right way. Rock on, let's go.